All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Today, we're going to be discussing the recent federal court decision that came out last week, which suspended the DACA program again, but it was only a partial suspension. DACA is still open for business, but not fully. And we'll explain what all that means for people with DACA, for those who haven't filed their DACA yet, and those who've filed their applications already but have been waiting. And I know there are so many questions right now, but we will try to answer them based on the information that we know so far. And as a reminder, if you have any questions about DACA, please send them through the comments. We'll be happy to help and address those questions. And please don't forget to like our page and subscribe. And today, we have our attorney here, Ann Miller, who is certainly no stranger to these sticky DACA questions. So she is our managing extraordinaire, managing attorney, I should say, at our Dallas firm. And she's very experienced. She's a good attorney, good litigator, and one-time paralegal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you bring a lot of insight into these issues, which is great. And we're happy to have you here with us to share some of your wisdom, man. But before that, we're going to go ahead and talk about this new recent decision. And I want to give you a little bit of a background because if you noticed, our picture is a roller coaster. And that's how we feel that we're riding a roller coaster, that DACA is a roller coaster for many individuals who basically were brought in the U.S. through no fault of their own. They want to live here, they want to work here, just like everyone else, and contribute to our society. And I think it's important to discuss briefly how we got here, because it was a bumpy ride. Since 2012, that's when DACA was created. The program has had its ups and downs. There was times when DACA has been operating fully, providing work and benefits to hundreds of thousands of students, workers, family members, professionals, you name it. And there were times when DACA has been shut down and suspended, only to have those suspensions reversed months later. And DACA is up again, right? So that's why it's up. We have the ups and downs. And in 2017, one of those down moments, if you recall, the Department of Homeland Security under the Trump administration, they started to phase out DACA. They wanted to get rid of DACA, if you remember, particularly for those applicants who were filing DACA for the first time. And then that led to a ton of litigation. Well, last year, we were excited about the Supreme Court decision. If you remember, the Supreme Court, they said, we're going to leave DACA alone for the time being. And it didn't like the way that DHS tried to pull the plug on DACA in 2017 when it was trying to phase it out. They said it was unfair. So DACA was brought back to life in its entirety, or so we thought. So about a month later, here we go, ups and downs, right? About a month later, DHS tried to restrict DACA once again. And then a few months after that, a federal court in New York said, forget about it, and reinstated DACA because the guy who headed up DHS, if you recall, and the Chad Wolf, was not legally appointed. So that they did away with the actions of DHS at that point. And they reinstated DACA as it existed in its original form and back in 2012. So anyway, late last year, DACA became available to everyone, and applicants who have never filed before, or may have missed out on filing DACA when it was alive, that they were allowed to apply for DACA for the first time since it was disallowed a few years ago. Which brings us up to now. With this decision by Judge Hainan, who a lot of people see as an activist judge. I mean, he was pretty vocal about DACA prior to the case. And so the states, the plaintiffs here, they picked the right guy for them, and they knew the best place to bring this action. So pretty interesting there. The Judge Hayden said, look, DACA was illegally created because it did not comply with some of the requirements under the law. And they're talking about procedure here, that specifically that the program did not go through what is referred to as a rulemaking process that is required of agency programs that involve applications for benefits. Anyways, I don't want to confuse you, but that's the gist of the decision. There were additional rulings as well, additional findings, I should say, but that was the gist of it. So we know what it was about and why primarily, but Anne, if you can tell us who this decision, who does it primarily impact?
Well, first I wanted to compliment you on your New York judge impersonation. Forget about it. I 2 thumbs up on that one.
I was worried it might be like a Jersey type of thing.
But for this decision, the people that are primarily impacted by the ruling are going to be the people who are applying for their initial DACAs. So the injunction basically says that they cannot approve any new initial DACAs. So anybody who has their DACA application for renewal pending doesn't affect them. People who have their existing DACA doesn't affect them. It's affecting the people who have not been approved for an initial DACA as of the date of the decision. So those of you that have not filed your DACA, this is impacting you guys.
Yeah. And it impacts pretty much everyone here. The lives of the many DACA candidates that who would have benefited from this program, who aspire to be someone in our society, doctors, professionals, athletes, astronauts, you name it. We have clients who were going to school, who were making good grades, who were playing sports, and now that dream for the time being, and I want to emphasize, just for the time being, is gone. So the decision impacts everyone, including family members, and it really holds down our potential as a country of being this great country, a nation of immigrants and ideas. The next question that we have is, and this is based again from the fear that this decision, I think, is causing, is can a person who has DACA, can they continue to work and live here safely from deportation?
Yes, if you've got your DACA, it's unexpired, you can continue. This decision does not impact it at all. If your DACA is coming up for renewal, you can go ahead and renew it, as the decision only affects initial people. People who have their DACA expired, their initial DACA expired, something happened and they missed the expiration, they can file that renewal still. So its renewals are fine. You can continue on with that. And DACA stands for deferred action, which means they're not going to pursue deportation against you. So you've got that deferred action and continuing with it. So long as you stay out of trouble, no DWIs, drug offenses, those kind of things, domestic violence. Obviously, those kind of arrests impact your safety from deportation. But a vast majority of DACA recipients and applicants obey the law, and they are the ones that are helping us. They're frontline workers. They're the nurses and doctors that have been saving countless people from COVID. And so we need them to be able to continue their work. And so luckily, the ones that already have DACA are able to continue.
Yeah, and that brings us to a question that was presented before we got on air, and this is in Spanish, but it's from Emily Super Cool Maxwell, which I love that term. I wish my name was long like that. It's in Spanish, but I'll translate. It's let's see here what we got. Okay, so is it up here? All right. So this question basically asks, Buenas tardes, abogados. They have have a permit, a DACA permit, and it expires in March 2022, next year. When can they renew their DACA? When would be a good time to renew their DACA?
USCIS has said they want it filed 6 months before. You can file it a month before it expires, but that's not advisable. If you file it in too early, I've not seen them rejecting it, but they've said that they want people to send it in, 5-6 months before it expires so that they can process it timely without you having that pressure of an expiring work permit, so that your employers don't breathe down your neck too much.
Yeah. And how long right now is it taking? Because I know it has varied. Like last year around this time, it was a couple of months maybe.
Yeah, DACA renewals have actually historically been processed very quickly. We do know that a lot of the DACAs, if you file it more than 6 months before it expires, they take their time on those. If you go on the USCIS's website, they have processing times posted, and it kind of varies about, I think one of them is posting like 1.5 months to 5 months. What we're basically seeing is most people are processed within that 5 months, and it almost seems like they're taking them in the order in which they're going to expire as opposed to the order in which they're received. So people who file it only 3 months before, it's not advisable, but they seem to be also processing those folks in time. So the idea is don't wait till the last minute. You can file your renewal. This decision does not stop you from doing it. USCIS will accept your renewal and they will process it.
Yeah. And then last week, or a couple of weeks ago, USCIS announced that they were going to put more boots on the ground, right? That they were going to add more officers to process DACA applications because of the lengthy processing. We hope that will also reduce the processing time. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see about that. Moving on to our next question here. Let's see here. And it's somewhat connected to what we've been talking about already, about what is going to happen to DACA applications that are pending. We know that the renewal applications, right, will be processed as normal, and there shouldn't be any issues there. But as far as new applications are in effect, they're going to be held or suspended. There's not going to be any action on them. But they're also, I found it interesting that they also didn't mention anything about rejecting or denying those applications, right? And those.
Yeah, they said that they will continue to accept them. They're just not going to make any decision on them. I have been hearing some reports that DACA initial applicants who had a biometrics appointment scheduled, they've been receiving phone calls or texts or messages that their biometrics appointments are being canceled. And so, I'm always wary about somebody receiving a text or something from immigration, always making sure that it's legitimate. But it does sound like we're hearing it from other attorneys and other clients are receiving these kind of messages. So if you have an initial DACA application pending and you've been scheduled for biometrics, just be aware that might be canceled. I would go ahead and show up to my biometrics just to verify that it is indeed canceled.
Right.
Because, it is a few hours of your day to go down there and do it, but I would prefer to be on extra cautious on that. But odds are they are going to cancel those biometrics because they can't take any action until there's a change in the order, if there's an appeal or something.
Yeah, and speaking of that, I mean, the applications that we filed, the initial applications, and this was starting from November of last year when they changed it up and they opened DACA for everyone. We had filed some applications, some initial applications that had been pending up to this point, and there hadn't been any fingerprint appointments scheduled for them to date. So I found it interesting that it's pending for a long period of time anyway, if you were going to file your new application.
Yeah, biometrics seem to be a mess in all benefits levels. Because of COVID, they had to limit the number of people that could go in. Plus, they had to reschedule a bunch of people who were scheduled for their biometrics when the lockdowns all started. So I know that that's something that they continue to struggle with. And hopefully, as they get the more boots on the ground and increased capacity as more and more people get vaccinated.
Yeah. So this is a question that is definitely something that as an attorney we have to look at carefully and decide if our client who is eligible for DACA, but they're not approving these applications yet. What should they do at this point if you can't? I mean, nothing says, and I think this is interesting. What the court said here is it said it will allow USCIS to accept new applications, but it won't allow them to make decisions on them. So I thought that was interesting. So nothing prevents a first-time filer from filing an initial DACA application. The question is really, what's the advantage of filing that? And there could be. I mean, if you kind of left the door cracked open a bit for if you have a case that is pending a new application, they mentioned this rulemaking process. The judge was hung up on the fact that that DHS did not go through this rulemaking process before it created DACA, which is why he disagreed with the program, with the policy. And but what if they did comply with it? And this rulemaking process, what it really means is that before an agency presents a program, it's like a preview. So you present it before the public, you announce it, and you, me, everyone in the public have a right to make a comment and say, oh, I don't like this, or I don't like that because of this and this and that. And that process is known as a notice and comment period, and has to occur before certain agency actions or policies are implemented. And that was what the judge was hung up on, that didn't occur, and therefore the DACA program was not legal. But what if USCIS, and from what we know, they are in the process of making it legitimate by going through this rulemaking process. There is a possibility that we have a DACA 2.0, meaning that they introduce DACA through this process, and after this process, does it make it legal again? And what happens to those applications that are filing, that are pending? It presents a really interesting scenario. So there is a possibility. It's not completely dead yet. There is a possibility, and of course, there is always the possibility that the order is overturned or reversed on appeal. And what we know right now is that the government, the Biden administration, is appealing this decision. So we can see that. So there is a possibility of change. So they didn't, the court, or USCIS for that matter, when they announced some guidance yesterday, they didn't say don't file it or they will reject it. It's just that they're not going to process it. And I guess in parentheses at this time. So
yeah.
What is your take on it, Anne? I'm curious.
No, I agree, because I mean, the fact that they're basically saying in the decision you can go ahead and file, they just can't approve, kind of seems in my mind to say we know that there's an injunction probably going to happen on appeal. We know that this regulation process has started. So we know that there's the possibility that initial DACAs will be able to be processed again. So I think that's why they're saying, you don't have to reject it, USCIS, and why USCIS is saying they're not rejecting them. So I think for people who have not filed their initial DACA, I think they should seriously consider about going ahead and filing it, because that way they can be poised. They're in the process. USCIS has it So when the shackles are removed from USCIS and they're allowed to process it, your application is already there.
Right.
Obviously, there's some downsides because you have to spend the money, you pay the filing fee with uncertainty as to what the future is, pay legal fees, stuff like that. But even if you don't want to take that step and file the initial DACA at this point, I highly recommend you start gathering those documents because you're going to need to show proof of physical presence. And that stuff is not easy to get for a lot of folks that have not filed their initial yet. They have to pull school records, they have to get their payroll records, they get medical records, all sorts of stuff that they've done. And so you want to gather that. Those that didn't finish high school, they need to start looking at the programs for GED or community college to get that high school diploma, so that they're poised to take advantage of something that comes down that might help them. So if you haven't filed your initial DACA yet, put yourself in a good position to take advantage of it when it does come back.
Yeah.
Knock on wood, it comes back.
Right. Exactly. And consult with your lawyer. This is as long as your decision is well informed, because it's true that even if you file it, they can't approve it at this moment. But you're pretty much hedging your bet that in the future there could be some action, just as long as you recognize that there is a risk that nothing happens with your application.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know yet what's going to happen with the filing fee. If they're not going to reject it, then logically that says that they're going to head and process it. I don't know. But there's a lot of these details that we don't know at this moment, but we will share that information with you as it becomes available. This is another interesting question. And we have clients certainly in this scenario that want to know, can they still apply for advanced parole? What do you think, Ann?
Yes, USCIS made an announcement, a news release, I think yesterday, towards the end of the day. They said that they will continue to process advanced parole applications for DACA, people with DACA already. So that's not just accepting it and holding it in advance. They will process those advanced parole applications. So if you have your DACA and you have a humanitarian or a business reason for that international travel, then you definitely want to consider applying for advanced parole. Always consult with an attorney, make sure there's no drug offenses or something that you forgot to mention. But advanced parole is definitely something to consider.
By the way, I think it's interesting that Judge Hainan, in saying that DACA was illegal, mentioned advanced parole, because Judge Hainan said that you can't create DACA. There are already laws on the book that spell out what types of benefits you could apply for. None of them have to do with DACA. And so you can't just invent a new type of status or visa or whatnot. And they mentioned advanced parole. He mentioned advanced parole as an example of the government going beyond, or the executive power going beyond what's written in the law. And I found that interesting that they would use that, because it's not, advanced parole is something that's already mentioned in the law, and that's something that we do in other contexts. But anyways, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's next?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, as you mentioned, there is the rulemaking process. If they comply with the APA, the Administrative Procedures Act, then that gives everybody a new bite at the DACA process. So that's something. Obviously, legislation could happen. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But with DACA, right now, the most immediate thing I foresee is an appeal of this decision and the request for an injunction, which would then allow initial DACA applications to continue. So that's what I foresee for the immediate future of DACA.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so part of that question is, what's going to happen with DACA, not only what's going to happen with DACA, but what's the solution, right? If there is a silver lining from this decision, is that it has invigorated talks in Congress about the possibility of introducing Dreamer legislation. You'll see more movement. You're going to hear more discussion. It's more important now than ever to have a permanent solution. And so they're wanting to introduce this Dreamer legislation, and it comes in various forms. There's been various proposals through and I'll let you explain it, what that means, a Senate budget reconciliation bill, which only requires a simple majority to pass. But I think it's important. We need this. We need to put an end to this stop and go cycle, where in one moment we have DACA, and then the next day it's gone by court order, only to have it reinstated months later, and so forth and so on. And too many lives are being placed on hold, awaiting the outcome of the next court decision, which is not fair. It's just not a way to live, from court decision to court decision. These individuals, these are more certainty. So brings us to here, right, as to why it is so important to have Dreamer legislation, to have a permanent solution.
Absolutely. I know that DACA has been referred to as a Band-Aid. And so sometimes I guess you have to rip the Band-Aid off in order to, have the legislation that confronts the issue. I think a lot of times the congressional representatives and the senators, they just breathe a sigh of relief when there's a decision that brings DACA back in place, because that says, oh, I don't have to worry about it. They can kick the can down the road. They don't have to deal with it now and deal with the political repercussions of it. I think right now we've got the Democratic Party is very identified with supporting Dreamers, but there are Republicans that are supporting it too. And so it would be nice if they got together and did this, but they may have to do it through the reconciliation process. And right now, Dreamers are the most, I would say, sympathetic group of people needing immigration reform. I mean, these are people that they were brought here 1 year old, 2-year-old. They have no identity to that country that they were born in. That's not their home. This is their home. And so many people are sympathetic to that, no matter what political party they belong to. So it's hopeful that either through the reconciliation or through some kind of deal that Congress can make, that they can do this and it's a lasting solution.
Yeah, and one of the bills that has been proposed and actually has passed the House of Representatives, and we mentioned that the Senate is the problem here. That's the point of resistance. But one of those proposals that's gaining steam is the American Dream and Promise Act. And this is not a new bill. This is a bill that's been proposed a few years back in various forms. And it proposes to give a fast track of getting a green card, to get a green card for those who have DACA currently. And it also has a second track for those who don't have DACA, but they could apply for this conditional residence if they meet certain requirements that look DACA-like. I think there was some difference in the requirements. In DACA, you have to show that you entered the United States under 16. And under this proposal, this new law, you only have to show that you entered prior to turning 18. And that would be great. That would expand it, because we have individuals here that just barely missed the age limit and don't qualify for DACA. But this would be a good way to resolve this issue, to expand not only for those who have DACA, but to those who are potentially who would meet the requirements of DACA or have been in the United States for a period of time or going to school. This would be a good solution for them. But yeah, that's one of the proposals that we're tracking.
And I would urge people to contact their representative and their senator and tell them, look, I'm supporting Dreamer legislation and you need to too. Yeah.
So, this is again, whenever there's bad decisions, we get these questions and concerns about what will happen to me. Will ICE now try to look for me and deport me? What would happen if they deny my application? Are they going to put me in deportation proceedings?
Under the Biden administration, they've released their guidelines and priorities for putting people in removal proceedings. So no, ICE will not try to deport under these guidelines. Just because you had an application denied, they're not issuing notices to appear and putting people in removal proceedings. It's other factors like criminal activity is what usually puts a person in removal proceedings. So just having your DACA denied is not really going to generate that notice to appear. Fraudulent documents, like submitting false documents to try and prove that you were here at a certain time, that can possibly lead to it. But what we've been seeing, it's vast majority of people is because of criminal.
Yeah, they changed their policy from let's deport everyone to more of a priority system where there's different categories. So if someone is here without any status, but they present a national security threat or have committed serious felonies, and that person is more likely to be processed than a person who's in school, has no criminal record. And so that is a difference in the way that they're looking at it, deportation wise, the different administrations that we've seen. So, I want to just briefly kind of sum up some of the takeaways from the decision. And as we conclude, this decision, it represents a setback. It's a setback. But as I mentioned earlier, there is a silver lining. And it's important that DACA recipients or students or dreamers, let's just say, living in our immigrant communities, they should be aware that this decision does not affect renewals. So if you have your DACA, if you want to renew it, you should renew it. Okay. It only applies to first-time applicants who are filing their initial DACA, who have never filed their DACA application before. And they will not be processing, or they will not be adjudicating those applications. And I want to say, for the time being, I think that's important to mention. It's not mentioned anywhere else, but you can read between the lines and think, yeah, there could be something on the horizon. USCIS is still accepting new applications. And as I mentioned, they're not adjudicating for the time being. This case is being appealed. This is something that you should be monitoring. We are constantly updating our clients through social media, Facebook Live, Twitter. We have an app. It's called Law Pilot Guardian, and you can look for that information. We'll send that information to you if you're interested, where you will receive alerts when there is a court decision, or if they overturn DACA, you will get that information. And it has it's a beast of an app. So it has way cool features. I'll let you look at that. But the point is that you have to be on top of it, because this order could potentially be reversed somehow. And rulemaking right now, the DACA, we could see a different version of DACA. USCIS is committed to complying with the order. So if the judge didn't like the way that it was created, well, maybe they'll think about creating it in a way where the judge would not say anything, or make it more compliant under the law. So we could see a different version of DACA, which would be interesting. And then, of course, track dreamer legislation. This is something that Ann and I we monitor every day, and we look at the different proposals. It's the political climate right now. It's not great, but I think this decision has prompted more discussion, more dialogue to getting a permanent solution. Would you like to say something, Ann?
Oh,
Closing?
just, it's a roller coaster. There's the ups and the downs. We'll be up again, and, the sun will shine on us again.
Right.
I think that we just need to keep advocating with Congress, keep reminding them who Dreamers are, and the family members of the Dreamers need to be pointing out how it's affecting them, the U.S. citizens, spouses, and children. And we just need to make sure that they're aware that these are not faceless people trying to take your jobs. These are important members of our community.
Yeah, very good point. Well, thank you for joining us. Once again, if you have any questions about DACA or any immigration related matter, please feel free to send us a message or give us a call if you want to consult about your case. Please don't forget to like our Facebook page and download our app. We'll see y'all later. Take care, everyone.